So look, thanks, Michael, for coming along and joining us. This is the first in our series of thriving during the decade of disruption. And I guess what we were really keen on within the UQ Business School was to try and unpack how can entrepreneurs and companies and organisations, even not for profits, how can they find a way to thrive and pivot through this challenging time, and not even just through this challenging time, but what I think we're understanding, and I guess we're only a couple of months in, is that the rate of disruption has been accelerating for quite some time. I mean, it's been accelerating constantly, really. But what I think we're anticipating, and this happened during the GFC, is that the rate or the velocity of that disruption, the rate or velocity of that change, just goes up when there's a black swan event. Because what it does is it just opens holes in the economy. And some of those holes mean that people drop down into those holes and they disappear. But what then happens is that creates space and creates air in the marketplace. And that just opens the door for new entrants. So you get incumbents suffering, and then you get new entrants sort of starting to surge. And so I guess what we want to do from a UQ Business School point of view, we spend a lot of time talking about strategy and talking about innovation, talking about entrepreneurship. And I guess what we wanted to do in this series is start to unpack how can individuals, whether they're in their own startup company, whether they're thinking about forming a startup company, or even if they're in a corporate or an SME, how can we give you some tools to work out how to be able to exploit this challenge, this crisis, so that you actually don't fall down the hole, that you actually find a ladder rather than a snake and climb out of that. So in some senses, what we want to try and do in these series is really talk about probably the key reason why businesses fail, the key reason why products fail, and that's very simply because no one wants them. People don't want their products, or they just don't enjoy what they're getting, and we call that the lack of product market fit. And so, do you have the right product for the right customer? Do you solve the right problem with the right solution? And that's going to be the essence of these conversations, which is how do you go about finding that? Because that's when we look at entrepreneurship and why 95% of startups fail, it's because they didn't get product market fit. And so over this series, we're going to be talking to entrepreneurs and like yourself and investors about how do you find product market fit and how do you know when you see it. So Michael, I want to lead off really with giving you, because you've got such an interesting story, because you've had a really big startup that you were involved with, and I want you to unpack that a little bit, and then I want you to sort of take us through that story as to what happened, where did it start, where did it go to, and then what happened, and then we'll come and start talking a little bit more about what have you done from there, and what's your new startup. So maybe, Michael, I might throw over to you and just give us a little bit of the Shoes of Prey story. Where did it start? Where did the genesis of the idea, again with this theme of product market fit, when did you think you had product market fit, and when did you realize maybe that had run out or you'd exhausted the market? So maybe give us that story.
So co-founded Shoes of Prey. The original sort of thesis was that women would want to design their own shoes. So the basic value proposition that we built was you could come to our website, choose the different leathers and materials, heel height, toe shape, and design your own pair of fashion shoes. We then made them and delivered them to you. The kind of original, I guess what led us to that was our backgrounds. We could see this was 2008, 2009. We could see the online retail space in Australia was going to grow over the next 10 years. So we wanted to do a product that was unique and differentiated that would suit online retail. My mum, sisters, and co-founder Jody, who was also my wife at the time, would go on holidays to Hong Kong, and there were some little stores in Asia, in Hong Kong, where you could design your own shoes. And they'd sort of been doing that for a few years, and then designing shoes for friends for a few years. And so there seemed to be this interest in this idea of customizing shoes, and we've kind of put two and two together. People seem to like designing their own shoes. That would be a good concept for an online retail business. So that's kind of where the idea stemmed from. I guess what gave us confidence that we had at least some initial product market fit was we'd explored a whole bunch of different ideas, but we ran a test where we kind of took we didn't build an online shoe design or anything. We just took photos of all the different options, and we emailed about 100 of our female friends and said, hey, this is the concept we're looking at doing. You know, the shoes are normally going to cost $300. We'll do it for half the price if you design off the photos, so we can do some testing. And we got like 20 or 30 people willing to pay $150 to go through this process with us. So that gave us a kind of an indication that, yeah, there might be that people seem to, or at least willing to pay for this, whereas some of our other ideas, we'd had ideas and we didn't get really much response from, much enthusiasm from people, certainly not the amount of enthusiasm that we had for the ideas. So it was pretty clear that those value propositions weren't going to work. So yeah, we ran that initial test. That got some really good feedback, and then we kind of started the business. Built an online shoe designer, had some good suppliers in Asia that we were working with for the production, and we kind of grew to a couple of $1 million a year in revenue. And we were kind of running the business at cash flow break even. And we were doing well in this niche of what we realized. Yeah, we were doing well in this niche of this women who were really passionate about designing their own shoes, and this was a kind of really creative woman. She often worked in a creative sort of industry. She had a good sense of her own style, and had the confidence to design something. And she loved it. Like NPS scores were in the 90s, just ravingly positive customers. Most of our customer acquisition was through word of mouth. So we were doing really, really well in this niche. And we had a couple of sub niches like wedding shoes and small, large, wide and narrow fit that we did well in too. So yeah, we were growing the business there, but we were getting all these mass market customers coming, or we're getting like tens of thousands of customers a day coming to our website and not buying. So we had really low conversion rates on our website. And when we ran surveys and focus groups to understand who these customers who were coming to our site and not buying, who they were, and what we realized was they were mass market fashion customers, so they weren't in our creative niche. But when we talked to them, they were clearly interested. They were coming to our website. They're clearly interested in this idea of designing their own shoes. And what they told us, they said the reasons we're not buying are, one, we want a simplified shoe design experience. It's too freeform what you have now for this creative customer. Two, we want a shorter lead time. We want to get our shoes in 2 weeks rather than 5 weeks, because we're kind of often buying shoes for an event we've got coming up in a shorter period of time. And then three, we don't really want to pay a premium. If you can price this at the same price as the normal shoes we buy, then that makes it an easy decision for us. So we looked at those three things and we said, well, we can deliver this value proposition, but to do that, we're going to need to hire a team of software engineers and user experience people to simplify the shoe design experience. And we're going to have to go build our own shoe factory to get the lead times down and the unit costs down, because our suppliers didn't really want to scale up this business, and there was no third party we could operate with. So to do those things, we needed to raise capital, because that was going to be a fairly big investment. So that's when we went out and raised venture capital funding, basically to build out this value proposition for the mass market customer, and to kind of cross the chasm from our creative niche customer through over to the mass market fashion customer. So we went out, and over the next 5 years, we ended up raising 4 rounds of funding, progressively larger as the business grew. We ended up raising 35 million Australian dollars. And that was to build out our software engineering team to simplify the shoe design experience and build a factory, develop all the processes to make shoes really efficiently, one at a time. And over the next 5 years, we delivered that value proposition. So we simplified the shoe design experience. It was really fast and easy. You could shop a range of shoes as you would on a normal shoe website, and then make modifications to those shoes. So it was much simpler than the really creative freeform designer that we'd launched with. And we got our lead times down in the last couple of years of the business down to 11 days from when you placed an order to when you received your shoes. And we brought our retail prices down from sort of $300 down to about $200. Same price point as the same quality shoes in the market. Then we partnered with David Jones in Australia and Nordstrom in the US, so you could go onto the women's shoe floors in those department stores and design your own shoes on iPads in the stores. So we were bringing the value proposition to where the mass market customer was. Basically executed on everything that our market research had said that was needed to scale and be a $100 million plus business. But we grew through that period. We grew from sort of a 2-3 million revenue business to about a 12 million revenue run rate. But that was nowhere near the 100 million that our market research said we should be at, nor the kind of 25 to 30 million that we needed to be at even to break even. So yeah, it was like, okay, well, we've grown, but why have we not grown enough? And now we'd built the value proposition, we could actually go and see how consumers were behaving as opposed to just running surveys and focus groups and asking them. And when we watched how consumers behave, this mass market consumer behaved on our website, what we could see was she loved the idea of designing her own shoes, but she wasn't going through and converting even with this value proposition. And it was because consciously she thinks she wants to customize, but deep down subconsciously she doesn't really have the confidence to do it. And she really just wants to see what's popular in fashion magazines and on Instagram and be shown by designers, you know, what's cool and what's on trend and exactly what to wear, and to buy not only that design, but even to buy that brand of shoe. So what she consciously thought she wanted, which was to customize, was basically the antithesis of what she actually subconsciously wanted, which was to be shown what to wear. And so we built our value proposition and based on what she consciously thought she wanted. And yeah, that wasn't actually what she wanted. So yeah, ultimately we tried a whole bunch of pivots, tried a whole bunch of different things, and ultimately just basically had to close the business down. So yeah, a whole bunch of fairly painful learnings over those last few years of the life of Shoes of Prey on product market fit. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I mean, what's sort of in some ways tragic about this is you did everything right. You followed the lean pathway. You did the customer validation. You did it fast and cheap. So you did that lean prototyping, minimal viable product. You got that bit right. Then you were breaking even, so you're able to produce a product. And so you actually did that front end really well. And I guess the challenges or the break was just in crossing that chasm, which is not unusual. Is that you did a great job of satisfying the early adopters and the innovators, but that early majority is a profoundly different customer and obviously has a different risk appetite. And that's really what you found. And so there is this degree of caution around building a business model for your early adopters and innovators and then just thinking you can hit the hockey stick. But in reality, what I think I've learned from hearing you tell that story a few times is that it's a totally different customer, and the assumptions you make, even if they're assumptions not based on what they tell you, they are not always true. And so have you got any thoughts around how if you were doing it again, what would you do differently in terms of trying to get more understanding of that early adopter, so that early majority mass market customer? What sort of processes or questions could you have asked, or experiments or MVPs could you have done to try and work out whether they would actually buy this shoe or not?
Yeah, and I am doing it again, and this exact question like keeps me up at night. I think I've got mild PTSD from not getting this right the last time around and spending 10 years on creating a value proposition that didn't get product market fit. So I think about this a lot. I think the key thing I'm applying this time around is I think there's two ways to answer your question. So one, if you're trying to change consumer behavior, so if you're trying to build something that no one's ever done before and you're trying to change consumer behavior, that's hard. And that's what we were doing with Shoes of Prey. We were trying to get people to change their behavior and design their own shoes rather than buy them off the shelf. That's hard to do. And if I was ever in a position where I was doing that again, I would ask the customer what they wanted, but I would delve into the psychology of what's actually going on in that customer's mind and really try to hone in and ask questions that delve deep down into their psychology of what they're actually looking for in the product, to see if I can draw out things that might be in their subconscious and not at the top of their conscious mind. And I don't quite know how to do that. That would still be challenging, but with the benefit of hindsight, we didn't do enough of that with Shoes of Prey. We just listened to what the customer told us, and that fit with our thesis, and we're like, boom, this is going to be great. We can go and do this. In hindsight, we should have asked those deeper questions. But I think the actual easier way to solve this problem, and the way I'm doing it this time around, is don't try to change consumers' behavior in the first place. Try to just give them what they're already doing and buying. And also, and there's pros and cons to this, but also try to find a way where you can watch consumers' behavior rather than just asking them what it is that they're doing. So with Shoes of Prey, we couldn't do that because no one had built a design your own women's fashion shoe business before. So there was nowhere where we could really go and watch how consumers behaved in the category and with that value, and watch how they behaved with that value proposition. But with the business I'm doing now, I can go and watch how consumers behave. And that is, a much less risky thing to do, at least in my limited experience, but a much less risky thing to do than just asking them and what they want.
And look, that's some couple of really great insights. That particular bit about trying not to change consumer or human behavior. And I come across that with researchers all the time that have got a great idea for an invention, maybe a health invention, and it's potentially transformational. And they go out and they talk to lots of customers, and they come back to workshops I run, and they say, the consumer has the problem. They just don't know it yet. So if only I could convince them that they've got this problem, then they would love my solution. And I sort of look at them and smile compassionately and think, you poor soul. Trying to convince people that they have a problem is actually really hard. And so hard that governments are the only ones that try and do it, and they don't do a very good job of it either. So I think that's an incredibly good insight. And I guess the lessons there are really valuable, and taking that into your next business. And it's sort of, I guess for me, summarizing part of that lesson is don't trust your consumer. You've got to build empathy with them, but consumers lie all the time, because when you ask them a question, they tell you what they think they want you to hear or what they think they want to be true. And so there is that point of getting empathy and building, using ethnography to try and really understand that consumer and get inside the consumer's head, which is what, you've articulated really well. So maybe, Michael, let's move on to what you're doing now. So the Fable Foods is a really exciting journey. Just tell us a little bit about where that started from, and how you're applying some of those lessons into what you're running with the Fable Foods journey.
So I've been vegetarian for 4.5 years. For me, kind of ethical, environmental, and health reasons in that order. It was just a personal decision. Didn't think anything more of it when I went vegetarian. I was doing Shoes of Prey up until 18 months ago. But when I finished up with Shoes of Prey 18 months ago, took 6 months off. Kind of needed a break after the 10 years, and particularly the fairly challenging last couple of years of that business. I spent that sort of 6 months, not even kind of working out what I wanted to do next, but basically just taking time out and going wherever my intellectual curiosity took me. And because I'd gone vegetarian 4.5 years ago, I just found myself reading lots of books about industrial animal agriculture, and I got very passionate about the idea of helping to contribute to ending that, and thinking through the best ways I might be able to do that. Thought, well, maybe I can apply my entrepreneurial experience and help make it easier for people who want to reduce their meat consumption to do it. And I'd been living in Los Angeles for the last 4 years of Shoes of Prey, and been eating all the Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers and other plant-based products in the category. Sort of thought, oh, well, maybe I can find another gap in the market here, and develop another meat alternative. Because thinking through some applications of that product market fit journey with Shoes of Prey and how they might apply into the meat alternative space, to the changing consumer behavior path would be to try and convince meat eaters to turn vegetarian and eat hemp seed patties and falafel balls and salads, and that's a pretty hard sell for that. Some people will do it. The vegans and vegetarians do it, but your average Australian is not going to, loves the taste and texture of meat, and is not going to give up meat and turn vegetarian. And it's going to be a hard job trying to convince them to do it. I've tried to convince all the people around me to turn vegetarian in the 4.5 years, and I think I've convinced 2 people. I caught up with one of them the other day. He's not even vegetarian anymore. So it's either I'm bad at it or it's a tough sell. It's probably a bit of both. Whereas there are a lot of people, there's a whole bunch of surveys that show people do want to reduce their meat consumption. Health reasons is the biggest one, followed by sustainability and ethics sort of third. So people want to reduce their meat consumption for health reasons, and there are a lot of good reasons why people should do that. We eat about 110 kilograms of meat per person in Australia each year, and that doesn't even include seafood. And it's not we evolved eating meat, but nowhere near that quantity of meat. It's not good for us. And there's a bunch of scientific data that says that. So people are becoming more aware of that. Documentaries like Game Changers are kind of popularizing that scientific research. So yeah, people want to reduce their meat consumption, but they still love the taste and texture of meat. So if you can deliver them the taste and texture of meat, but in using something other than animals, using, in our case, mushrooms and plants, then you can get them to reduce their meat consumption without them really having to change their behavior. So that's kind of the logic behind what meat alternative companies like we are doing. And then the particular sort of angle that we're taking and the gap in the market that we're filling is a lot of products. Beef mince is the actually just behind chicken. It's the second most commonly consumed meat in Australia, and the same in the US. And most of the meat alternative products on the market replicate beef mince and beef burgers. So we've set out to replicate a different type of meat. We're replicating slow cooked meats like pulled pork and braised beef and beef brisket. So we're not trying to compete head to head with Impossible or Beyond. We're offering a complementary product that can work in plant-based alternative to different types of meats that you might normally cook with. And then the second thing we're doing is, I'm a pretty healthy eater, shop at my local farmers markets, do a lot of my own cooking. And for me, I try to avoid kind of heavily processed foods. I try to eat a sort of minimally processed whole food diet. So my thought was, could you develop a whole food based, minimally processed meat alternative? That set me down the path of exploring mushrooms as a base ingredient for a meat alternative. That led me to meeting my two co-founders who are heavily sort of mushroom technical backgrounds in the mushroom industry. And together we've developed this slow cooked meat alternative using mushrooms as the core base ingredient. So we sort of take a shiitake mushroom and we shred it to give that sort of stringy, meaty texture. And our product's 2/3 shiitake mushroom. Shiitake mushroom is incredibly healthy food. And then we use other all natural plant-based ingredients to help make those shiitake mushrooms taste like a slow cooked meat.
So how did you? So you had this idea, and I guess I know you were working with a chef and you did some prototyping, but how did you get that point where you thought, actually, I think this is a good idea, but I actually think this is a great business idea? What did you have to do to prove to yourself that this was actually worth going through this process again? Because I imagine the 10 years in Shoes of Prey extracted a fairly big toll. So apart from you wanting to do this, but how did you know, when did you know that you had something that was really going to work?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things. So one of the big differences for me in Shoes of Prey versus now Fable is my own personal passion for the product. So there are a lot of things I loved about the Shoes of Prey business. I was very passionate about online retail, about building a brand, about whole manufacturing supply chain parts of the business. But I was never personally passionate about women's shoes. And I wouldn't wake up on a Saturday morning and want to read fashion magazines. Like, I didn't have that personal passion for the product or the... With Fable, I'm vegetarian. I grew up in Queensland. I love the taste and texture of meat. I still miss it, even though I've been vegetarian for 4.5 years. And I'm vegetarian, so I eat a lot of meat alternatives, and I love doing a lot of my own cooking, and I'm just very, very passionate about the category. I think that passion, and so I do wake up on a Saturday morning and read about the meat alternative category, and what meat alternatives are launching in China and what's launching in the US, and who's manufacturing what ingredients are they using to do it. Like, I just love reading about that stuff, and so I think that that gives me a better insight into how the customer thinks in this category, and also just makes doing the business even more pleasurable and enjoyable. Want to be doing. So that's one piece that helps. But then the second and probably bigger thing that's helped is there are already meat alternative brands that have products on the market. So I can literally go into Coles or Woolworths and stand at the meat alternative bay, watch how customers are shopping the bay, seeing what products they're picking up, what they're reading on the packaging. They put that product down, they pick up another one, they put that one in their basket. And then I can creepily ask them afterwards, why did you pick that one up and put it down? What made you choose this product? And actually watch how consumers behave, and then ask kind of pointed questions on those behaviors to try and understand the psychology of what they're doing. Whereas I couldn't do that when we were starting with Shoes of Prey, because that didn't exist. The value proposition didn't exist. So that's been a massive help for getting both of those things have been a massive help for getting the insights into how the consumer thinks. I can relate to the consumer, and I've got good personal insights, and I'm reading about what that consumer's doing every day. And I can go and actually watch how they're behaving with other people. Sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. like, oh my God, are we going to get, is this going to work for the mass market? And are we going to get this right? And even just had a 2-hour conversation with my founders and colleagues in the business this morning about some product development decisions we're making. And is this actually going to work for the mass market customer? So still, deeply aware of making sure that we get this product market fit piece right. But yeah, I think a couple of things that I'm doing quite differently that I hope, touch wood, are going to make that easier and get us to a different result this time around.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a saying that goes around in startup land that product market fit. And I talk to investors, and I'm going to be having this conversation with Jim Kalakarinas next week, who's an angel investor and has invested in a few of my companies, and he always describes it. Product market fit, it's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. And so there's this term that we use, which is, you got product market fit when the dogs are eating the dog food. If the customers are just embracing the product and then consuming it, then you've sort of got product market fit. And as you said correctly, that's really hard to do when there's no evidence, when you're trying to get dogs to go vegetarian when they just won't. And so part of the thing that I think is also a reason why startups fail and why products fail is because the actual entrepreneurs eating their own dog food. Is because they believe in it so much, but they lose perspective, and so that there's a danger there and a risk there. And I think what you've done is by being I guess in some senses a fast follower, as opposed to creating a new category. And we know that Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger both spent $500 million building their business. Huge amount of risk. And their first year of sales was $50 million. A little smart ass sort of startup company in the US called Cauliflower. Created a cauliflower pizza base and got $45 million in the first year of sales. So sometimes that fast follower, because you're not trying to change behavior, is a much better strategy. And that sounds like your pathway. So I'm just wondering, give us a flavor of where Fable is at the moment. And are you getting a sense that the dogs are eating the dog food yet? Are you getting a sense that consumers are actually really liking this? And give us some of those examples.
Yeah, so we launched Fable in December. We're fortunate to have Heston Blumenthal try the product middle of last year. He loved the product, so we launched it at his Melbourne restaurant, Dinner by Heston. Closed now, but it was still open in December. And then Heston's been using the product in his UK restaurants prior to coronavirus. So that was a really great stamp of approval for us to have one of the world's top chefs actually love the product. And there are a couple of reasons he loved the product. My co-founder Jim, he's a chef and mushroom scientist. He'd gotten to know Heston a couple of years ago as Heston was sort of exploring the mushroom space. Heston is kind of interested in the brain-gut connection and was sort of learning more about the health benefits of mushrooms. So Heston already had this interest in mushrooms as a food source, and then when he tried our product and saw what you could do with it in a culinary sense, and it was made from mushrooms, he got very excited about it. So that was a good initial proof point for us, and that has helped us to lend some legitimacy to what is a new product. That's kind of helped us get meetings and things. People are at least willing to take a meeting when you say that you've got this meat alternative product. First initial sort of tick of approval, but still doesn't show product market fit in the mass market at all. We also late last year launched in the meal kit company Marley Spoon. So we've now had, and this is where we're starting to get better data. we've had about 15,000 customers cook with Fable at home in a Marley Spoon recipe. In January, Marley Spoon told us it was their best new product launch that they've ever had. They've sort of doubled the number of recipes that they're using Fable in. And so, the Marley Spoon customer is still not a perfect kind of representation of a mass market customer. They skew a little bit more metro and slightly wealthier, but it's still a pretty good indicator in a sort of with a more mass market customer. And then, prior to coronavirus, we'd rolled out onto the menu at about 50 restaurants across the country. So we're starting to get some adoption in restaurants there. Just yesterday, we launched our first retail product into Harris Farm in New South Wales. So we're in about 15 Harris Farm stores in New South Wales now. And then in mid-June, we'll launch into 600 Woolworths stores. And I think that 600 Woolworths store launch will be our first kind of true test of how the product performs with the mass market customer. So we've got some early signs that I guess actually delving into this a little bit more. I think the early adopter for us and the kind of beachhead niche for us is like the vegan and vegetarian consumer. Those consumers are pretty easy to convert to eating plant-based meat alternatives, but that's not that would be our equivalent in Shoes of Prey of that creative niche, that creative customer who's passionate about designing. So we could build a good sized business targeting vegans and vegetarians, but we're not going to achieve our mission of helping to end industrial animal agriculture because those consumers already eat a plant-based diet. We want to convert the meat-eating customer and help the meat-eating customer reduce from 110 kilograms of meat per year down, reduce that number down. And so we want to, our mass market consumer is that kind of flexitarian consumer who wants to reduce their meat consumption but still eats meat. And so, they have to succeed with that flexitarian consumer, and that's going to be our true test, our true product market fit test.
Yeah, no, that's going to be really interesting to watch. And I know you've, when we talk, there's a lot of excitement around this category because, of the health, the environmental, and I guess there's all those different reasons why that mass market customer is going to take this product. Is it around health? Is it around the environment? Is it around animal ethics? If it was really seriously around animal ethics, I guess that'd be vegetarian or vegan. So that starts to exclude out some of those other reasons. But that's been really interesting. So are you sort of getting to understand that mass market customer and trying to work out what is the button you've got to push for them?
Yeah, so all the data says that health is the biggest reason that they want to reduce their meat consumption. It's kind of health is far and away number one. Sustainability in the environment and sort of carbon emissions is number two. And then, ethics is a distant third. So that health piece is the most important. And you kind of see that coming out in documentaries like Game Changers. That was like a 90% health-focused documentary with a smattering of the environmental benefits. And even in the stories that other plant-based meat companies are telling, they're focusing in on the health benefits of a plant-based diet. And then, when I go and creepily watch customers and talk to customers in supermarkets, the primary reason I'm getting when I'm doing that is health reasons. And so that for us, that's really good because that's the kind of one of the core things. When we've thought of sorry, my brain's jumping ahead of what I'm saying. So health is the main reason people want to eat a plant-based diet, but still far and away the most important thing for them in choosing the kind of main protein on their plate is that they want the taste and texture of meat. So if health was the number one thing, again, those customers would be eating salads and falafel balls and hemp seed patties because those things are all very, very healthy, but they're not because they might think they want to reduce their meat consumption for health reasons, but they still love the taste and texture of meat. So the number one value proposition, a piece of the value proposition. And so in our product development, we've really focused on nailing the taste and texture of meat. That's been the most important thing to us. Second, a close second most important is price. People are willing to pay, the flexitarian customers willing to pay a little bit of a premium at the moment for products in this category, but they don't want to pay too much of a premium. So when we launch into Woolworths, so we've really focused on making sure that the ingredients we're using are readily available at scale, and then we're not going to run into price issues as we scale up. So shiitake mushrooms, we're using shiitake mushrooms as opposed to some sort of different unique species of mushroom, because shiitake is readily available. And so when we launch into Woolworths, we're going to launch a 250 gram pack of our slow cooked meat alternative for $8.50. And the reason we went with that price point is it's the exact same price as Woolworths have a 250 gram pack of pulled beef made from cows, and they sell that for $8.50. So we're going for the exact same price point as the meat that we're replicating, so we're not charging a premium. And then the third thing that we've focused on is the health benefits, and that's for us kind of, I guess, within the meat alternative category, that's where we have a strong point of difference, because we're using mushrooms as the base ingredient rather than textured vegetable protein, which is what most other people that use textured vegetable protein. It's not that it's unhealthy, but it's just a more processed nutritional benefits as shiitake mushrooms do. So yeah, we've got this. Basically, you're getting to eat more mushrooms, which are really good for you, but getting the taste and texture of meat and doing it at a price that you'd be paying for the same kind of meat anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And look, for all you that are listening on, watching on, I've tasted this product, and I'm a meat lover. I love pulled beef, pulled pork, pulled anything. But this product actually tastes fantastic. It is really amazing. So when you see it, grab it. I'm going to ask you one more question, but while I'm doing that, if anyone who's listening on has got a question you'd like to answer, just put it down in the chat, and I'll have a look at it in a minute, and I'll pose that to Michael. But Michael, I want to just the last question I want to ask you is really around investment, because you've had a $25 to $30 million startup which tanked. Everyone lost their money, and you lost 10 years of your life, but you've learned a lot. But just wondering, how hard was it to then go and raise more money for a new startup, having had that experience behind you?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I was concerned about with starting again. I still had a good relationship with all my investors through Shoes of Prey, and they're all very understanding. They're all venture capital investors, so they're well aware that a good portion of their investments will fail. But yeah, I did lose $35 million for investors who invested in Shoes of Prey. So that's not a small sum of money, but by any means. So yeah, I was deeply concerned, worried about how, what are people going to think? Are they going to think that it was me that caused the business to fail, or are they going to back me again? I was very, very humbled that for when we went out to raise the money for Fable, I went back to some of our Shoes of Prey investors, and it was two old Shoes of Prey investors that co-led Grok Ventures, sort of two really good Australian venture capital firms. I'd lost them millions of dollars in that was like truly deeply humbling. And then I think that kind of helped tell the story to other people that the investors in Shoes of Prey didn't they'd been on that journey. They'd seen that the whole journey that I shared with you before. They'd sort of seen that journey. They were kind of bought into the market research that we'd done as well. And it's just that we made a mistake there on not delving further into the market research. We'd executed well. We'd done lots of other things in the business well. So so that was nice. So we ended up raising a $1.6 million round on a safe note back in November last year.
Great. And that was, as we were talking before, that was exceptionally good timing, raising that money last year, and rather than having to raise it this year. So
totally.
So a bit lucky there. And so I missed the name of the couple of investors that were from the Shoes of Prey round. That sort of cut out on my end. Who were they?
Blackbird Ventures and Grok Ventures.
Okay, very good. So that's a great experience, and I think it's testament to you to actually then stump up again, because you're putting a lot of yourself on the line in terms of doing a startup company, and actually just putting yourself on the line and actually just saying, look, I've got this great idea, I've learned a lot, and I'm prepared to have another go. You're prepared to back me, and to actually have people to obviously respect the integrity you ran through that Shoes of Prey experience is a credit to you. So well done on that.
I didn't actually want to start another business. Like, the thought of doing it literally made me feel ill. But so when I moved back to Australia at the start of, or the end of 2018, my initial thought was I wanted to work in this category. And so my thought was I'll go find an alternative protein business and work for them rather than starting something new. But there was no one in the category. Everyone was a startup. No one was hiring. So I kind of had a decision to make. I either go work in a company in a category that I'm not as passionate about, or if I want to contribute to ending industrial animal agriculture, yeah, there's no jobs going, so I'm going to have to start something. So yeah, so I sort of didn't necessarily set out to do this, but it just kind of evolved that way.
Yeah, no, that's great. And there's a number of people listening on that are doing the UQ MBA program. And I know you've joked before that you've been able to get yourself a $35 million MBA, and many students can't quite afford or can orchestrate a $35 million MBA. So well done you for having the most expensive MBA in Australia. But one of the students has asked, Sumya has asked if you can unpack a little bit more about how you went with the pricing, because you could have actually gone with a Heston sort of super premium, $50, a kilo, and you've sort of done a little bit of that, but now you're moving into the Woolies. How did you make that decision about being able to work out how to price it, either with the food service with Marley Spoon or with going into the retail arrangement?
Like, people are highly price elastic, and actually for a lot of food products, price ranks higher, ranks as the number one piece of the value proposition, ahead of even taste and texture. And I mean, you only need to walk into Coles and Woolies and see the products that perform best. It's not the sort of Heston level premium products. Those are little niche categories within a Coles or a Woolworths. The products that perform well with the mass market are, really sharp price points. So if our mission is to help end industrial animal agriculture, if we build a premium sort of Heston price point, super premium price point product, we're only going to reach in industrial animal agriculture. So in order to achieve our mission, we have to be at a mass market price point. So from the get-go, our thought process and our logic was, we've got to make sure that what we develop has amazing taste and texture. It's got to be at a reasonable price point, and we want to do it in a way that's healthy for people and using all natural ingredients. So the price bit was kind of core to our whole sort of initial thinking on the value proposition. And yeah. I mean, you would have experienced too obviously in the drinks category, highly price elastic category, and you can have all the taste and health benefits in the world, but if Coca-Cola sells a hell of a lot more product than a lot of other drinks, and yeah, that's because it is at a reasonably sharp price point.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I know in the perky drink that we've developed, we set it sort of $4, which is quite reasonable, quite in the middle of the price range. But I know the kombucha market has really grown on the basis of a cheaper, certainly inferior product, but a cheaper product, and I know in the kombucha market you've got Buki, which is a premium. It's probably the best kombucha, commercial kombucha on the market, but they're selling in glass at $6 plus, and that's their decision, and which is they want to stay at that premium level, but the sales just can't get there when they're at that premium level, and so it is getting that. Again, that's part of product market fit, isn't it? I mean, trying to understand your market, and then getting the product designed so it actually fits into that market.